Ilia Stambler, PhD, is the Chief Science Officer and Chairman of VetTech Association, the Movement for Longevity and Quality of Life, Israel. Ilia is also a board member of International Longevity Alliance, ILA. He is a fellow at the Department of Science, Technology, and Society, Bar Ilan University, Israel. His research is focused on the historical and social implications of aging and longevity research, including ethical, policy, and regulatory implications. He has also been involved in mathematical modeling of aging and aging-related diseases. He is the author of the books A History of Life Extensionism in the 20th Century and Longevity Promotion, Multidisciplinary Perspectives, and over 70 academic papers, including journal articles and book chapters. Ilia is actively involved in advocacy for aging and longevity research, serving in several national and international organizations for healthy longevity research and advocacy. He has initiated, organized, or played an active part in several national and international advocacy and educational campaigns for healthy longevity, such as the International Longevity Day and Month campaign for enhancing research, development, and education for healthy longevity and prevention of aging-related diseases in Israel, the successful campaign for the inclusion of aging into the WHO work program. Let's welcome Ilia Stambler to HealthGevity podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast of HealthGevity. And today we want to talk to a guest that most of you probably know if you already have studied in the field of longevity or you have followed a lot of conferences and meetings all around the world. So today we want to talk about a lot of amazing topics that probably some of you have not heard of it, and especially the latest important conference about longevity in Israel. And today we have with us Ilia Stambler, which is the Chief Science Officer at VetTech, which is a movement for longevity and quality of life. And also he is the board member of International Longevity Alliance. So thank you so much, Ilia. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. So I want to start my question mostly with most of the people I interview with. The first time that they got interested into longevity. Now, for me, it goes back to when I was 17. And I normally ask about the first book that they read about it and how they actually started studying in this field. Why, in the first place, you became interested, actually? Because, aside, let's say, your academic or, let's say, study background, I want to know that when was the first time that you became interested in this field and why?
Great question. Actually, I'm being asked it quite a lot, and I have several ways to answer it. I have several templates, so I'll try a few on you. The first one, we're Jews, so we like to ask a question instead of an answer. So my answer is, how come others are not interested? It's such obviously important question, such important topic. So how come others not interested? Why it is I who have to explain how I got interested? Should they explain why they're not? What's wrong with them?
Why they're not? Yeah, right.
So,
but when was the first time? Yeah, I mean, for example, what was it in when you were a teenager or later in your university? When was the first time you realized that?
Just to say that I hope we get to this kind of the prevalence, our longevity movement, health longevity movement, that others will have to explain to us when was the first time they thought that living long and healthy is not an important thing. But for me, I was interested since I was 6. I here to have two explanations: one more emotional, one more rational. The more emotional one, I think I first thought about it when I was 6. 6 years old, when I thought actually I'm looks like I'm mortal. Looks like I'm going to die, and my loved ones are going to die. My grandfather's. I went to my grandfather, said, at the age of 6, I'm going to die. He said, you don't have to think about it. You have to think about playing and put it out of your mind. But I didn't. I think that's a distinguishing feature of prolongevities or life extensions, that we don't put this thought out of our mind. We will live to live with it. Some people block it out of the mind, and that's also why we don't have too much involvement with the topic. But I didn't, and there are some other emotional explanations. For example, if you ask what books I read on the topic, I'm a big fan. I love Persian culture, Persian literature. One of my first books I read was by Omar Khayyam. Omar Khayyam's poetry.
Right.
And if you read him, he's all about life is so
Absolutely.
beautiful, but we're all going to die. Such a pity. And I thought, no way. We have to do something about it. So I was
unfortunately, he didn't know about longevity, and but definitely his philosophy was something very, very different than the people of that time. And what you said is very interesting. In the age of 6, 7, or 10, let's say something like this, children start learning and understanding about death. And I think we will later talk about it, but I think parents should start teaching children from that age about death and how horrible it is, not as a something to accept it, as a something to fight actually against. And this fight is a very, very beautiful thing. I think it's not just like other fights, right? It's fight for life. And it makes it so beautiful. And actually, it defines all your decisions that you make in your life, whether you want to live a healthy life or no, you don't care and you just live, like 99% of people don't care about yourself, don't care about your health. And finally, in the age of 60 or 70, you'll get a lot of diseases. So later we will get to that part, that how and why we should teach children and start actually teaching from the early ages. But I want to ask you about, you are actually, as a researcher, you are involved and active both in scientific research and also the advocacy for longevity. First, I want to know a little bit about the background of both of them, and I want to learn from your perspective that how do you see each of them, and how, let's say, what is your unique insight that it brings to your work in both sides?
Well, I don't even see them as different sides. I think one whole movement, one whole endeavor. Because I'm from the Department of Science, Technology, and Society. My PhD is in the Department of the Science, Technology, and Society. So I'm a trained generalist. I try to see things holistically, and I believe you cannot address aging any other way. You cannot, dismember it into any specific, mechanism of cells. You have to look at the whole process as a whole, biological, social, environmental. You just no way to look at aging in any other way. And that's why my advocacy is not disconnected from my science. Basically, most of my science is on this intersection between biology and then society, the influence of social norms or regulation on biology, and also, my book is about history. Of course, history is the most comprehensive, holistic field you can imagine. But anybody doesn't know of my book, it's the one.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you about it because I was reading it. I had started reading it, and yeah, that's so amazing. And I have some questions about it. Yes.
So also the idea in this book that society, our aspirations, our human motivations influence our pursuits, also in science, and vice versa. Things feasible in science also influence our social agenda. So for me, it's two sides of the same coin.
All right. So about your book, actually, I'm interested to know that during the history, if I think it's about 20th century, right? It's not going back too much in the history, like thousands of years, but we know all that human being from the earliest time, actually, they were thinking about longevity. But I want to know that from your perspective and about in your book, because I haven't finished it yet. What is the turning point in the history of longevity that you consider as the most important point, that after that probably the scientific community changed their mind about longevity and put more, let's say, effort in that field, and they found that aging is something that we can intervene. It's not just something that we watch, right? Or we accept it as a normal thing in our life. This is something that we need to do something about it. And finally, it's a matter of only time. We all know probably 10 years, 20, 50, 100, but finally it's something that we can somehow stop and maybe even reverse it. So tell me about that maybe specific point or maybe some points in the history that we have seen maybe a paradigm shift in this field.
All right. So first of all, my book isn't just about the 20th century. The title is the 20th century because, for a PhD topic, I had to somehow narrow it down. But actually, it includes the entire history. If you read from the beginning, it includes the Egyptians and
Right.
the Indian tradition, Jewish tradition, Mediterranean tradition, everything. There is a lot of materials about the 19th century. Also, I get into the 21st century. The book was published in 2014. So basically, it's as much history as you can grab in one 600 pages book with 1,200 reference notes. So basically, it's the whole story once again. I'm trying to tell the whole story. And it is quite difficult to distinguish all those watersheds. I would say, if I have to pinpoint a watershed, I would say it started with Mechnikov, with Ilya Mechnikov, my namesake, the Nobel laureate, who actually coined the term gerontology, the scientific field of gerontology. And I would say that he started the truly scientific study of aging based on histological observations, based on some experimental findings. Also, he wasn't restricted to just descriptive theorizing about aging. He just wanted to apply this knowledge directly to prevent age-related diseases or even aging itself. He wrote black and white that aging is a disease. If you ask for an authority, he's the authority. The Nobel laureate who first said that aging is a disease and we have to fight it as a disease. The fact that it occurs to everybody doesn't make it any more acceptable. So I would say that the turning point in the history started with Mexico, with modernity, and then it grew and grew. And I would say that another turning point in terms of public perception was, I would say, in the beginning of the 20th century with the emergence of the wide acceptance of the wide application of the internet. Before that, people thought about it. There were some institutes, there were some groups, people talked with their friends, but with the emergence of the internet, we really started to form a community. We really started to build the movement. That's when we became involved since about the beginning of the 20th century. And then since then, we were growing, and actually getting into mainstream almost.
Yeah, amazing. Actually, you talked about aging, whether it is a disease or not, or people, or let's say the scientific majority of scientific community accept it. I have a lot of questions later. I'll ask you about that. But what is interesting for me, because you are from a Jewish background, I think just like the blue zones, that 5 blue zones that we have, 5 areas in the world, I think Jews, no matter where they are, normally they live longer and healthier. It's interesting for me to hear from your experience, your real experience in your life, from maybe your families around, I mean, your parents, grandparents. What are maybe 3 or 4 main factors? I know we know most of us that lifestyle is a very, very important part of it, but what kind of lifestyle this is important. So I really want to hear from your real experience that why is that? Is that about the genes, probably some part of it, lifestyle, or some other things?
Oh, well, I couldn't hypothesize about 40 causes why Jews generally live longer. The lifestyle is obviously important. From the Torah, from the first religious teaching, we were taught to follow some basic hygienic rules, and that kept us healthy. Sometimes in certain territory in Europe, the Jews were the only ones to survive. So they accused us, that they poisoned the wells, and we brought the plague. But actually, no, we actually followed the basic hygienic rules that kept us, while others didn't. So unfortunately, they didn't survive. So the basic hygiene, if you look at the religious tenets, the halakha, the rules of conduct, a lot of hygiene, a lot of regimen. So regimen is also very important. Fasting, intermittent fasting, and also very important intellectual activity. Intellectual activity is highly correlated with longevity, even more than physical activity. Jews were, from the early age that they taught to study, to get engaged in intellectual activities and debates. about certain texts. So I believe it also played a role. And of course, also genes, we are quite strongly selected against, in all environments we lived in. There's a lot of pressure to weed us out. So actually, the tough ones survived also through the Holocaust. If you look at people who come to Israel after the Holocaust, they're made of steel. So we really have to take all this into consideration. But generally, I believe there's also this motivation. I also speak about it in my second book, longevity promotion, multidisciplinary perspectives, where I analyze longevity traditions in different cultures, including Persian, Jewish, Christian. And in Judaism, you have a very strong valuation of life, a very strong tradition of valuation of life. And I believe from that also stems a lot of interest in science, in medicine specifically, in medical research. So I think all these factors combine to kind of contribute to pro-longevitist
Yeah, absolutely. And Israel actually has a very thriving longevity, even research community. I think a part of it goes back to the mindset, and what you talked about is the social connection, which is very important. And we see actually in the five blue zones, one of the most important one is that support of the community, living with the children or the people around you, that they support you, that you don't feel alone. That's the most terrible thing, that in most of society, people over the age of 70 or 80, they feel it because they feel they are away from the real life, and they are just waiting, to die. And that's the word thing. So about the, let's say, research community in Israel, why they are so much interested in this? I want to hear that reason for that.
So I believe once again that there are many factors. First of all, there's this ancient Jewish drive, to study and to preserve life. There's even a saying in Judaism: a person who preserves life like saved the entire world. So all this comes through also in research and interest in life sciences, specifically in medicine. But also there are various other factors. Competitively, medicine was one of the areas where Jews could excel, and also weren't so much prejudiced against. So all this combines, and just the pure tradition and tradition of excellence. But still, we still don't have radical life extension. Means that it's still not enough. What I mean is that we still need to grow the longevity ecosystem in Israel, and in cooperation with other countries, because obviously Israel cannot do everything alone. We only can do it in cooperation, synergy.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the better.
Well, I remember, the first book that I read, it was about, let's say, longevity. And of course, I think 20 years ago, we did not use the word longevity. It was anti-aging, if you remember. So it was The Fantastic Voyage by Ray Kurzweil and Terry Grossman, which they talked about 7 actually stages that if we can live long enough, we can live forever. So in recent years, longevity has become a buzzword, and we know that there are a lot of misconception about it, whether in the public or even in the academic, let's say, community. So I want to ask you about the misconceptions probably that you've seen even in the research community about aging itself and about longevity and about what we can do about it. So I would like to know your perspective about that. That what are some maybe, let's say, important ones that can affect this field, some misconceptions?
Once again, great question. First of all, I would like to pride myself on the fact that I also personally helped to create this bug. Before, even 25 years ago when we started, as I said, I was interested since I was 6. But the active involvement began since the beginning of the century, for about 25 years. And there was a desert. Nobody talked about intervention into aging, life extension. There were some fringe groups, it wasn't so much on anybody's radar, but we really pushed and tried to raise awareness and to create communities and published. So I'm very happy that at least there's also my part in creating this buzz, this massive interest around the theme of longevity, of life extension, of aging, anti-aging. So that's also something to be proud of. But then, of course, the one thing is to talk about something. Is another thing is to get actual health longevity extending therapy. So we are far from there. And here the difference between skepticism and optimism. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about healthy life extension. I dedicate my life to it. It's pretty much most of the time I think about and work for. But there's still, I think, a lot of problem, a lot of bottlenecks that we have to break through. Even at the basic conceptual level, we don't even have a working definition of aging, clinical definition of aging.
Yeah.
How do we measure aging? How do we measure the interventions to aging, success into aging? We talk about longevity, longevity clinics and longevity medicine, very nice, but what's your evidence that these treatments will actually extend longevity? The very basic question. Nothing has been tested for long term, longitudinally. As usual, the clinical testing works. You take a treatment for some time, and you take a treatment in a match without a treatment in a matched group, and not compare it after some time. Usually, it's mice, so it doesn't take so long, and you see what works. What doesn't in humans, there's no way you can do it. You cannot wait many years. So even the term longevity medicine has to be taken with a grain of salt. The same anti-aging. You could show that that some interventions affect some of the aging processes that we know are aging process. But once again, there is so much nuance, so much complexity. You don't know if they actually influence aging or aging-related disease and how we can separate. In short, there are many more questions than answers, and the field does need much further research. That's why in my advocacy, I mostly focus on the need to advance research-based understanding, critical thinking, analytical thinking about the process to get to even to the basic definition. What's aging? How do we measure it? How do we intervene in it? So I think that's the basic thing we have to advance before we even think about actual intervention.
Yeah. I think actually it's totally normal if there are some misconceptions because anyway, you cannot stop people from making mistakes, right? And as you said, it's not a field that we can, let's say, put some limitation and get the result from, let's say, a lab test on human in 5 to 10 years. We cannot do that. So we need to let people, lab scientists, everyone actually try to do whatever they can in as long as it's safe, for them, so that they can see the results in their life, especially about their lifestyle. We know that I personally believe like 70-80% of our longevity totally depends on our lifestyle, and just 20 to 30% is about the technology and all of this intervention. So I want to ask you this important question, and I think as you or our listeners know that in HealthGevity Nation, uh, one of the most important goals that we have is about raising the awareness and educating people about the longevity itself. And it's not about only longevity, it's about HealthGevity, because some people think still when you talk about longevity, the first thing that comes to their mind, oh, I don't want to live to 100 because I know I'll have a lot of problems. So we put health first, and then longevity is the consequences of actually that health. When you are living healthy, you will live longer. So I want to know that I know that you are active in, let's say International Longevity Alliance and a lot of other advocacy organizations. So why do you think and believe that, let's say, advocacy is important and essential in longevity? Um, and tell me about your activities, actually, what you have done in the past maybe decade or two.
Right, but first I have to very briefly address what you said. From yes, people have the right to try and get the best treatments they can, but we have to qualify. We have to qualify.
Yes.
People have to understand. It's a very basic understanding they need to have. The deputy is paying an experiment. So by all means, open a longevity clinic, call it a longevity clinic, whatever. But make sure people understand the deputy paying experiments. That's our best evidence. From animal models, from some of the limited human trials, the experiment they create in the science. If you sell something, it will definitely increase your longevity. That's already a snake oil. That's certainly it's a very important distinction where we need to make.
Absolutely.
So that's one point we have to stress. And the connection with advocacy is exactly what's advocacy. It's not even clear. Advocacy is another way of saying education.
Right.
You actually explain to people about the important stuff, especially decision makers, people who actually control funding. So for me, education advocacy is about the same. So we just need to educate people for more critical thinking, for more studying, for more scientific approach to the field, including decision makers. I wouldn't want our advocacy movement to turn into thoughtless political activity. Where the people march on the streets with slogans "Aging kills"
Mhm.
without understanding what's aging and how it can kill and how we can intervene. We actually need to create a movement of thoughtful people who can contribute to science, not just political and the swarms of political drones. So
Right.
that's how I see our movement is different from some of the other advocacy movements. But general advocacy and understood education is very important. We need to convince people that it's important to
Yeah.
fight aging. It's the main cause of disease. We need to convince them even about the need to or the desire to extend our life. Some people think it's not even an important goal. We have some natural span of life that ends and that's it. They don't even have this drive to overcome it, to extend it. That's the basic education, basic advocacy we need to make. And basically, we need to convince people that the topic is important and we have to invest the resources in it, intellectual resources, material resources. We have to convince decision makers about it. So that's the role of advocacy.
Yeah, but
Uh,
I think mostly it starts from the basic education for young generation, especially because how did we learn about disease and aging and death and all of the thing? It was just from family, from school, education system, and unfortunately, nobody was there, 30 years ago to tell us that okay, if you have this lifestyle, definitely you will be away from a lot of diseases later in your life. And that's why we emphasize on teaching children and Gen Z and Alpha actually in school. That's why in HealthGevity Nation now we are talking to a lot of school, not only university, which already we are doing that, but even from the age of even 7, when they start learning, I think we have to create something. I mean, like let's say longevity. How can I say that? Let's say literacy, right? Longevity literacy, which is important besides mathematics, beside other science that children at school, when they learn, they have to start learning about the lifestyle. So we already have started doing this, and well, we've got a very good, let's say, feedback from the teachers and teaching children about the lifestyle because we don't want to teach them difficult scientific, topics. We want to talk about lifestyle because now we know that we see children in the age of 8 or 9, most of them they are obese. I mean, it's because of the lifestyle that they have, that terrible sleep. They are awake until 12 and 1 a.m., which they should be actually sleeping. And the, let's say, food choices that they make, which is the result of the bad education of their parents, right? So what do you think about this? How do you think we can bring maybe the education system to accept that it's a must and we have to do that?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. In our cultures, as we were raised, the prevalent paradigm was just to forget about it, forget about aging, forget about longevity. Live
Mhm.
day to day, and like a hamster on a wheel. So that's most of our cultures everywhere. We just tend to block the thoughts of aging, of dying from aging out of their mind because there's this mechanism of cognitive dissonance that we want to overcome. It's not without reason. Actually, if you realize you're about to die from aging and you live with it through your entire life, it's hell on earth. Without understanding that it actually can intervene. There were a few people like me and you and many of our colleagues and allies in the longevity movement who can live with the thought, but many people just cannot. They prefer to block
Mhm.
it. So we have to educate people, but carefully. You don't want to destroy their psyche by
Sure.
even fear through the whole life. And that's also why we don't teach children about it, but we have to teach them because it's life, it's reality, and we do want to create thoughtful individuals who will actually be contributing to our vitality, to our longevity. So it's very important, but it needs to be done very carefully. I'm also involved in this topic. I'm trying to put this topic not just of aging, but of biology of aging intervention into high school curriculum here in Israel. Talking with the Ministry of Education, so that definitely needs to be done, but it's not a simple task. There are many
Yeah,
forces against it.
absolutely. Yeah, it needs a lot of time and effort. But I actually have started myself with writing a sci-fi book for children, so that I think it's a better way of, making them interested about it. So that it's a story of a little girl that wants to learn more because she has a sick, grandparents and wants to help them. So starts learning and suddenly visits, let's say, someone from outer space will visit the Earth. And anyway, it's a story for children to learn more in a storytelling way so that they become more and more interested. And as you said, yes, we need to be careful to tell them mostly about the topic in a way that they understand it and they do it. We don't need to talk about immortality, for example, in the early ages. We need to focus and emphasize on the lifestyle. I think this is the most important thing because the choices that we make, it will become our habits, and the habits will be with us for years and years, and it's very difficult to change them. That's why the healthy habits is very important part of it. So let me ask you another question. Well, we know all that longevity is mostly about prevention, and most focus is about the point that still we are healthy. So how do you see the longevity science impacting the healthcare costs and, let's say, the resource allocation in the future, how it can affect the economical situation, both individually and in the, let's say, societal level?
Right, right. Great. Just one more point to the previous question.
Okay.
We have to inculcate this education, but we have to once again realize we're against very powerful forces. One thing is just the society makes us forget about it, block it out of the mind. And worse, people really want us to believe that death is good. It itself a lot of costs. Also, you asked about costs, so here's the thing about costs. The
Yeah.
most cost-effective thing for society is that people at the age of 60, the moment they start getting sick, they die or they
Correct.
kill them. And
Yes.
that's actually the situation described in Brave New World.
Mhm.
At the age of 60, people just kill off and save resources for the society. At the same time, society convinces the young children from young age that this is normal and beautiful. They give candies in so-called death days. So at the same time, they say for the side of on this other side, you convince that this is good. Uh,
Mhm.
so that's it's a very powerful societal drive that we have to fight, real fight, a real struggle. And as for the cost, the question is not so easy. It's quite quite prevalent to say that prevention will save our healthcare system. So the prevalent idea is that by investing in prevention, you will save healthcare costs later on. And it may be a reasonable assumption that we still need more data. It may well turn out that investing in prevention is not cost effective. For example, if you go to a gym or if you eat healthy, it's quite expensive. It would be more expensive than if you eat junk or don't exercise, live as a couch potato. So we still need more data, but then what? Of course, it's supposed to be a convincing argument that if we save money for the healthcare system, the government should all do it. But with my experience of 25 years of advocacy, also at the higher level, uh, this argument doesn't prevail so much on them. They just want to
Mhm.
know what is it that we can do now so that we and our loved ones and our children, our grandparents can live longer. So that's the main argument. That's the main longevity dividend, that we live longer, even if it costs more, if it's not
Mhm.
cost effective. We have to do it. We have to invest in prevention. We have to live longer and healthier. Uh, and obviously, the economy will survive if people are healthy and live long.
All right. Well, Ilya, actually, it's not only about the financial cost. What I mean is, for example, from the individual perspective, imagine for someone who, let's say, has diabetes, or after the age of 60 or 70, let's say they get Alzheimer's disease. I mean, it will be very costly for the family from the psychological point of view to take care of a person who cannot recognize him or herself. And this is terrible. And personally, I have experienced that from my close family. And this is one of the worst diseases in the world, actually. All right. I mean, we say someone dies and that's it. Actually, it's good. I mean, uh, dying is much better than living with a disease that you know that you cannot do something about it. And the problem is that you are not dying. I mean, you're just living, and every day is a death. So what I'm saying is this prevention is all about that, to be able to live until, let's say, maybe 20 or 30 years later, so that we can stop this aging. This is the thing. So now, talking about the aging, I want to ask this question. Is controversial, but I will talk about it because I am one of those who believe that we should consider aging as a disease, whether in terms of the scientific or even society. I mean, we have to teach that, we have to learn that, because when we consider, or let's say treat aging like a disease or as a disease, right? Everything is different. Your even daily choices, I mean, the investment of the government, let's say entrepreneurs, the whole society is acting in a different way. So, people like David Sinclair, they absolutely say that they consider aging as a disease, and we need to treat it just like a disease. And well, of course, on the other side, some people say no, we cannot accept it because it has negative implications on society, and they are bringing their reasons. But before you answer that, I want to tell you that my third book is about uh, whether we should consider aging as a disease, and why we should actually consider it as a disease. And I see disease like a dragon that is killing 100,000 people every single day, right? In every 24 hours, we lose 100,000 people from aging related diseases. So it's just like the dragon. And even I called my book Caging Aging. It means we have to cage this dragon, put it into the cage, and stop it from killing and eating people. So I would like to know your perspective on this, that how do you think about it? And maybe what are some positive and negative consequences of this, let's say, considering aging as a disease?
All right. So first of all, I once again have to take some credit. Have to pride myself in the fact that I was one of the active proponents of this debate. Even back in 2012, we were probably the first who actually brought this the topic to the government, to the Israeli government, brought to all the members of the Knesset, and demanded that aging is recognized as a disease, and that the resources are allocated to fighting it. It's on record. I believe we're probably the first to actually go to a high level. Of course, we're not the first with this idea. And Mechnikov spoke about it 120 years ago. So it's not a foreign idea to me. But since then, I got more involved, and our organization also helped, like International Longevity Alliance and Biogerontology Research Foundation, actually helps to actually recognize aging as a medical condition in the ICD. If anybody doesn't know yet, aging is now recognized as two types of categories in International Classification of Diseases: ICD-11 as a cause of disease, aging-related factor, and as a general set of symptoms, the aging-associated decline in intrinsic capacity. So even now, according to the International Classification of Diseases, aging can be recognized as a medical condition, something it can treat by medical means. Also, thanks to our advocacy, our organization, International Longevity Alliance, not only us, there were many others, but also we had our contribution. So basically, the idea is absolutely valid that aging indeed is the main risk factor or the main underlying cause of all chronic diseases and age-related disease. Also, the main risk factor of infectious disease. We saw it during COVID. All the people were the most affected. So if we had actual effective means to improve the health of all the people, we would actually have no COVID or have no consequences of the COVID crisis. So obviously, yes, aging is a material process. It can be addressed by material means, by medical means. So in this sense, aging should be recognized as some kind of medical condition. But once again, we have to be complex in our thinking. We don't, we don't go with slogans. Aging kills, aging
Yes.
a disease. We have to understand first of all what aging means. As we said, we don't have basic definition about what aging entails, how we can measure it, how we can measure intervention against it. Also, if you read my works, even back 2013, I published an article called "Recognizing Aging as a Medical Condition: Methodology and Policy," and there you'll find a huge can of worms that we'll have to tackle, like from which age we have to intervene. Obviously, you don't want to uh, sell all kinds of treatments, call them preventive, but without any evidence for that will benefit all the people. On the other hand, if we intervene into aging at a later stage, that's already not prevention, and it's already very difficult, and that's why also pharmaceutical companies don't deal with that. Also, there are many positive things during aging. Actually, in some of the models, we actually divide aging into degenerative process and life-sustaining process, coping process. Um, and there are even ideas that aging itself is a coping process, an adaptation process against, against deterioration from external factors. Basically, you have to slow down to be
Right.
overwhelmed. So it's complex,
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very simple example, all the people usually have a broader outlook. They're more holistic than the younger people. They have more memories. All this is disease. No, obviously. So we have to look exactly what is it that we want to tackle, what is it that we want to treat, to cure. That's why even in my work, I call it degenerative aging process. It's not the
Right.
entire aging process, it's the degenerative aging process.
Yes.
So with this clarification, I think we can proceed toward nosology, etc.
Or even if we do not, let's say, talk about it like a disease, some people like Aubrey Degraded, we had a podcast with, and I asked the same question. He said, I see it as a problem that can be and should be solved. So even if you see it like that, still is amazing. But my question here is that why governments? What are some obstacles in front of the governments that they are not declaring this? Because personally, I think if the first country declares it publicly, that aging is a disease and they want to take action. They want to spend, let's say, money on it and invest actually in that field. I think it will be just like a domino effect, and some other countries will do that. I know that David Sinclair is doing that in Australia, and you and some other people in Israel, some other people in other countries. But why until now we haven't been able to do that and convince the government? Because, this is something that finally should be done by the government. So what do you think is the problem here?
All right. So first of all, yes, I was among the active proponents of this debate, and actually with Meshnikov called aging a disease. But then, I got to nuance, and I believe that we have to be more careful in our terminology. First of all, it's mostly about semantics. Disease or not disease, it's rather something you can address by medical means. So if you talk with the same person and you say aging is a disease, what? The hair stands on end. No way. I'm diseased. I'm old. So what? I'm diseased.
Yes.
No way. But if you say aging is a medical condition, or if you say aging is a challenge, aging process is a challenge, okay, that's fine. Let's talk about it. So it's not about semantics, and we have to get our definition straight. What we mean to yes, aging is a disease. It's a bit provocative, but we have to be careful. We have to set our definition straight, and sometimes we have to maneuver a bit in terms of semantics. They talk about the same thing, but in more gentle words. But basically, yes, I believe we can and should recognize degenerative aging. Degenerative aging process is something we can treat. And why don't the governments deal with it? Actually, in my advocacy, in my decades of advocacy, I came to know that if you explain to them, to decision makers carefully, and reasonably, like we do now, they understand. They understand immediately. Yes, aging is the main risk factor, the main underlying cause. We have to do something about it. But then, they don't do anything. They don't lift a figure, but not because they don't understand.
Yeah.
They simply have other agendas. The aging is not on their mind. It's not their main priority. So
Right.
even now in Israel, I talk with politicians. I talk with the Minister of Science. Yes, they understand everything. Yes, very important topic. Aging, very important. But
But it's
then,
not the priority, right? That's the
that's
thing.
not the priority. Is the bombs from Iran and war. That's the priority. That's where
Yeah.
they're headed. So how do we make it a priority? That's a difficult question. So it's not
Hmm.
about semantics. It's not whether you call it a disease or not. It's about setting the social priorities right, and also setting people's incentives right.
Hmm.
If person works somewhere and gets a salary for something, it's difficult to convince him to drop everything and then work
Yes.
on aging because he won't survive to tomorrow. So no matter what happens in
Right,
this world.
absolutely. Actually, it goes back to the nature of aging itself because it's happening so slowly, right? So people do not feel that emergency for that. Well, it's not like COVID, which suddenly, let's say, in a very short period of time, even though it's killing 100,000 people but this 100,000 actually has become a statistic, right? It's not something that we pay attention to that much. So imagine that if world wants to do the same thing that we did for COVID, right? All the governments, all people, researchers, labs, in just few years, they could do something that we used to do it in 10 years, in 15 years. So I think if we do the same thing for aging, probably it will cut the time of reaching to that point of stopping aging at least by 50%. So I want to ask you this question. Where do you see the time that probably, well, the notion like longevity escape velocity that we reach, or sometime in the future that we can really stop this aging, or at least, well, now some people like, Brian Johnson and some other people in this field, they are trying to slow it down and they somehow have been successful actually. But stopping aging is a point that can change the whole world. So where do you see us now in, let's say, how many years do you see from that point that we can reach?
Right. So once again, we have to think about nuance. I believe the question when is absolutely meaningless. If we invest all
Mhm.
our efforts, all our material and intellectual resources in it, it could be in 3 years. If nobody cares, nobody does anything, it can be never. So basically, it mostly depends on us. So all those timelines, what's going to happen in 2030 and 2045, they're pretty much meaningless. It all depends on resources. You see here in Israel in 2019, I thought we were getting somewhere. We had the national program. We had the conference vice minister with the NIH. We were building the national consortium. We're getting there. And then there was COVID, and then there was elections 5 times in 3 years, and there was war. So we were stuck. So it all depends on our level of involvement. I personally try to to keep the flame, trying to invest my effort. So whatever happens around, I try to get. But not
Mhm.
many people like me. Actually, the general investment depends on a lot of external factors. So that's about the general timeline. And even before we discuss the timeline, we have to understand what are our endpoints. Very nice
Mhm.
to say, we defeated aging. How do we even show that we defeated aging? What the mortality dropped to zero. We have the first person to reach 130, 150. We have to think
Mhm.
about our endpoints. Once again, what I'm advocating for is not going to the streets with slogans. I do advocate, I organized this longevity month campaign. We do encourage people go to the streets with slogans, but I also encourage people to think what is it that we actually want to achieve and what is aging and how do we measure our endpoints. So that's the kind of advocacy I would like to advance.
Fantastic. So the next question will be about the recent conference that you had in Israel. It was Longevity Nation Conference. So I would like to, in a few minutes, talk about it. How was the conference, the idea behind it, what were the goals, and how much do you think you actually achieved that goals that you had before?
Yeah. So first of all, the main idea was to keep the flame going. People in Israel are quite depressed. Most of our
Yes.
young researchers and students they've been in the army for many months. The researchers abandoned the massive cuts in research budget. Our Ministry of Science, I believe, was cut by about $100 million, about 300 million shekels. So the massive cuts on science, on education, everything. So the idea basically was to keep the flame going, to keep the basis, because obviously the situation will improve. It cannot continue forever. The war starts and end. Our war on aging or degenerative aging will continue for many more decades. So we have to keep fighting that war, and that's why we had to do some events, some community building, some education.
Yeah.
So that's the basic idea. And we did it. I think it was quite successful, even though, we're supposed to have about 40 foreign speakers, leading figures in the field. All the who is who in aging research was supposed to be in Israel, and many of them actually bought the tickets. But then there was this attack on October 1 from Iran, and people that's about it. And all of them canceled their tickets. But still, all of them expressed solidarity and presented online. So there was a massive exchange of knowledge. On the Israeli side, there was the entire HealthGevity community, pretty much heads of laboratories, of institutes, of medical faculties of several universities. So it was a very, very encouraging, very, very useful event. And the outcomes, I believe, the outcomes will be that we keep this topic on the agenda, we keep it in the public mind. Hopefully, there will be a calls for research proposals. I expect a few calls for proposals with some funding following this conference. So we keep on going. Whatever the circumstances, we try to do our part.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really appreciate what you've been doing, and hopefully next year it will be there again, but this time in a very peaceful environment, and hopefully we'll meet there. So my last question will be about the future of longevity. I would like to ask you about what is something that most excites you actually about the future of longevity science, or maybe for now, what is the most interesting topic for you yourself that you are interested in personally and you follow that in the field of longevity?
Right. So first of all, let's be clear. For me, there's not any specific interventions that I'm pinning my hopes. Elimination of senescent cells or NAD replacement. There, nothing like that. They'll say people go invest in it. You'll have a large return on investment in a few years. No such thing for me exists. But because I see the evidence, I believe. But what I do believe in it, I do pin my hopes on in is the general increase of interest, increase of involvement, of thinking, of talent in the field. So that's what I believe, and that's what I believe we need to increase through conferences, through education, start from a young age, through the old. Actually, we shouldn't forget the actual older people. That will also give them encouragement to learn about longevity science. So basically, we do need to create this the massive community upheaval. That's my main interest, and that's I hope will bear fruit soon.
That's great. Thank you so much. So Ilia, please tell us that where we can find more about you, about your books or the activities, I don't know, videos, whatever you have. Please let us know where you are most active in.
So first of all, you can download my both books at my website, longevityhistory.com. You can download my big book on the history of the topic, the smaller book about the longevity promotion, various aspects, also articles. You can go to my other websites like ResearchGate. I try to make my articles available. So always happy to engage in discussions. The website of International Longevity Alliance is longevityalliance.org. Of the VETIC, the Movement for Longevity and Quality of Life in Israel, is longevityisrael.org. So these are my main organizations. Happy to come by. Also, the site of the Longevity Nation Conference is longevitynation.org. Also come by. You'll find a lot of videos and other resources. Practically, of course, we were always fundraising like everybody in the field. Obviously, the field is still starving. I'm actually now, if I may mention, I'm looking for matching with the Israeli Ministry of Science. They put in some chunk of money, and I'm looking for matching funding to issue call for proposals, which should be international. So if somebody has some funding to sponsor aging research in cooperation with Israel, welcome to talk with me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ilia, for your time. It was great talking about all the things that you have been doing during these years. Maybe the last thing that you want to say, something to share, something or a question that I haven't asked you?
No, I'm just very excited that your organization is active, and also our movement is growing generally. Our International Longevity Alliance now grew to 65 nonprofits from about 60 countries. I'm very excited about it, and I do hope that our longevity movement overcomes all the strife, all the conflict and difficulties in this world. I'm very hopeful. I know that you're originally from Iran, yes. I hope that one day we'll have Iranian scientists to visit Israel.
Absolutely.
At least from the diaspora, everybody is welcome. Actually, I have some connection with Iran, if I may mention. Mossad is not listening, but if they do, I don't care. Actually, I helped to establish the first website in Persian on longevity science. With some friends in Tehran, there's a lot of materials, my materials spotted there with links. So I have no problem with anybody. I hope we create a true cooperation with Iran and throughout the Middle East for longevity. That's our main unifying force.
Absolutely, yeah. And as every time I say that we are, let's say, a longevity nation all together, we have the same goal, same, let's say, MTP, if we can call it, the massive transformative purpose to cure aging and to live as healthy as possible. Thank you so much again for your time with us in HealthGevity podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.